Welcome to the America 250 PA Start Here, America Did podcast, telling the unique stories that make up the diverse fabric of Pennsylvania.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. My name is Sydney Harris-White, and I'm your host. Spring has arrived here in Pennsylvania. Flowers are blooming, warmer days are returning, and many of us are ready to get outside and explore. From scenic trails to hidden natural wonders, this is the time of year when adventure calls. That spirit of exploration is exactly what we are focusing on this April. Our guest is someone who has spent more than a decade helping people discover the incredible places that exist all across the Commonwealth. Jim Cheney is the founder of Uncovering PA, a travel website he launched in 2013 that highlights the destinations, hidden gems, and natural wonders throughout all 67 counties. Through firsthand visits and photography, Jim has documented more than 1,200 locations across the Commonwealth, from scenic hiking trails and historic landmarks to restaurants and lesser-known spots that many people might otherwise miss. Today, Uncovering PA has become one of the top resources for anyone looking to explore Pennsylvania and experience something new. Jim will be joining us for a special 2-episode series as we spotlight adventure across Pennsylvania. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so you've launched Uncovering PA in 2013, and since then, you've visited more than 1,200 destinations across the Commonwealth. Take me back. What started you on this adventure?
Well, we have to go halfway across the world to start this story.
Okay.
So my wife and I were teaching English in South Korea back in 2010 to 2012. And while we were over there, we were traveling around the country, visiting random places. And a lot of, my friends over there were saying, like, how are you doing this? You don't really speak Korean. Like, how are you visiting these places? How are you finding information? So I decided to start like a little website just to kind of put some of that information out there, with the idea too that when we left Korea in 2012, we spent 6 months traveling around the world. So we traveled from Singapore to Istanbul by land over the course of 6 months. And I kind of continued that website up through that time as well. And it was writing kind of destination guides about places and, things like that. I mean, there's plenty of worldwide travel blogs out there. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with those. Never with the idea of it making it any sort of job. Mostly with the point of, I'm traveling for 6 months. When I get back, I need to have like, hey, what were you doing the last 6 months? Right. Oh, I was learning, online content creation and, online marketing and things like that, which were somewhat novel back in 2012. When we got back from that, settled down, I got a job for a little bit, and I was like, I'd been traveling for 6 months. I'd been living out of the country for 2.5 years. I was like, I don't really want to just have like a regular job. I want to figure out some way I can make travel part of my job without having to travel constantly, be nomadic, travel around the world. And I realized that there just wasn't a whole, I was having trouble finding things to do in Pennsylvania. So I was like, somebody should write about it. Somebody should write about things to do in Pennsylvania. And so that's how I got started. That's where the idea came from.
And that leads us really right into our next question. Obviously, you saw a gap in Pennsylvania travel coverage. What was that like? What compelled you to start Uncovering PA?
It's hard to imagine almost 13 years later. But at the time, there weren't influencers. There wasn't any kind of blog or, information out there. There was a few scattered things, but nobody was really writing about things in Pennsylvania. And I was having a really hard time finding stuff to do. There have to be things to do in the state, and I'm having trouble finding them. And so other people are probably having trouble finding them too. And so it really was the idea of Uncovering PA. At the time, it was like, it's my quest to uncover PA. Like, what is there to do? At the time, I wasn't an expert, outside of like Philly and Lancaster, Hershey, and Pittsburgh. I didn't really know much of anything, and even though it was just the big things.
Right.
And so I'm like, there's got to be stuff to do. Somebody should be writing about this. And now, there are people who are, more people writing and doing video and everything like that. But at the time, there just wasn't. And so there was this gap that I felt really kind of could easily be filled.
And like you said about lists, many travel sites compile these lists without ever stepping foot in the places they write about. Why was it important to you that Uncovering PA be rooted in firsthand experience?
I mean, I just think that's the most important thing. I don't see how you can write about these places without having visited. I mean, there's still places. I've been doing this for 13 years. I've written about 1,200 places. It's probably closer to 1,500 places that I've actually visited around the state because I have a very long backlog of things I need to write about. And there's places around the state that I still feel that I'm not qualified to write what are the best things to do in this part of the state, even though there's probably very few people who've spent more time in those areas than I have, at least from a professional, thinking about it from a professional writing standpoint. I think that firsthand knowledge is the most important thing, because why are people going to trust you if you're just writing random lists? The lists always kind of drive me crazy because there's always things that I'm like, this is wrong. Why are you including this? Like, why didn't you mention this? At best, they're a base to jump off of to kind of do more research for yourself. But I feel like so often they're just designed to generate, revenue for whatever site it is doing or magazine or whatever, and not concern for people and trying to help them actually travel and visit places.
So after spending more than 400 days traveling the Commonwealth, what have you learned about Pennsylvania that most residents don't realize?
I went to college in Pennsylvania, but other than that, I hadn't lived in Pennsylvania before I came back after traveling.
Okay.
When I started the site, I'd lived in the state for less than a year because college doesn't really count from a standpoint of traveling around and visiting tourist destinations. So, what I learned is just how much there is to do. I've been to 1,500 places and I'm maybe like halfway through.
Oh, wow.
And that's not even counting, there's still plenty of, restaurants to pop up every day and different things like that. There's so many places around the state and we have such a wealth of diversity in the state as far as landscapes. You've got the mountains of southwestern and northeastern Pennsylvania. You've got the beaches on Lake Erie, which 4 million people visit Presque Isle State Park every year. It's the most visited state park in Pennsylvania. But I don't think that a lot of people in the eastern half of the state are even really aware of it. And the fact that we have like these great beaches up there, the amazing history in the state. All the way from Native American history, the founding of the country. George Washington spent more than half of his public life in Pennsylvania between his, military career and his political career. The birthplace of oil, the oil industries in Pennsylvania. So, there's so much history, so much diversity around the state. You could spend a lifetime traveling, just in Pennsylvania and not run out of things to do.
And speaking of traveling, Pennsylvania is often divided into 6 tourism regions. And I really like how you said that some people in Eastern don't even know what's going on in Western and vice versa. I'd love to actually walk through each one and have you share a favorite lesser known destinations within each. So starting, we're gonna talk about Region 1. This region is defined by Lake Erie shorelines, dense forests, elk country, and some of the most remote stretches of land in the state. When you think about this part of Pennsylvania, what's one lesser known destination that truly stands out to you?
Picking one spot for, a 10 county region is, I could pick more than one spot for every county, but we probably don't have time to go through 67 different, up in that area. Like I said, you have Presque Isle State Park, which is amazing. You have Allegheny National Forest, which is, incredible. Probably the one spot I think that's most interesting to me, at least, is that I had no idea when I started the website is Drake Well, which is just south of Titusville. It's up in the very northern part of Venango County. Up in northwestern Pennsylvania. And it is the first purposely dug oil well in the entire world. Most people don't know that the worldwide oil industry started in northwestern Pennsylvania. It never crossed my mind, but you think about oil companies, Pennzoil, right. Pennzoil, Quaker State. Pennsylvania's a Quaker state. All these companies started up in northwestern Pennsylvania. At one point in time, the vast majority of the world's oil came from northwestern Pennsylvania. Right in that same area, you got Oil Creek State Park, which was at one point a huge oil boom. John Wilkes Booth actually was part of an oil venture up there, and it failed. If it hadn't failed, world history could be totally different. If he'd had a successful oil career. That area up there with the oil history is just incredible.
So moving on to our next region, we have Beaver, Butler, Armstrong, and those counties, and of course, Allegheny. This region includes Pittsburgh, but stretches far beyond it into rolling hills, river valleys, industrial history, and mountain landscapes. What's a hidden gem here that surprised you most, whether it's a small town, historic site, or natural area?
So, there's obviously tons of stuff in Pittsburgh and, you have the Laurel Highlands, which is a great area. I'm trying to go a little bit more for something people aren't super aware of. Buttermilk Falls in Indiana County. It's an amazing waterfall, fairly easy to reach. You can actually go behind the waterfall. What makes it really cool, though, is the land was actually owned by Mr. Rogers' grandfather. When he was a child, young Fred Rogers would go and hang out at the waterfall and just relax there. It was one of his favorite spots when he would visit his grandfather. They've got, signage up about that, but you can just go and visit this beautiful waterfall that's down like a country road, kind of back in the middle of nowhere. That's really a great spot to visit. And one other spot, if I may,
absolutely.
because I feel like it'd be remiss if I didn't say this one as far as another hidden gem is Fort Necessity National Battlefield, which is in Fayette County near Ohio State Park. That is the spot where arguably the path to the American Revolution started. A young 21, 22-year-old George Washington led a group of soldiers out going to Pittsburgh to tell the French to leave. The French would have said no, and he would have just come back. On the way, he ran into a detachment of French troops and started a battle there, fired some shots. That was the first battle of the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War is what caused the taxation of the Americans, which is what led to the American Revolution. So you could make a very compelling point that 20 years prior to the American Revolution, George Washington fired the first shots that led to the American Revolution in southwestern Pennsylvania.
Small moments that really created such a vast amount of history. So moving on to our third region. This region blends Civil War history, farmland, state government, and mountain ridges. It feels both historic and also deeply agricultural. What makes this area unique compared to Western or Eastern Pennsylvania? And what is a lesser known destination that you would like to highlight?
I think what makes it unique is you have, the rolling hillsides with the agriculture. You have the upper reaches of the Blue Ridge Mountains hit up into, the very southern part of Pennsylvania, and you have the kind of the rolling Appalachian landscape through there that you don't have kind of beyond that area, and there's lots of stuff you could pick there, of course. I mean, just like anywhere. The halfway point of the Appalachian Trail is in Cumberland County. One spot I think is really neat is, and if you've ever driven down 81 through the Carlisle area, you'll see them at the Army Heritage Center.
Okay.
Right at the Army War College, which draws people from around the world to study warfare and things like that. When you go there, there's information about the U.S. military, a really well-done museum, but then on the outside, there's tanks, there's helicopters, there's recreated World War I trenches. There's just a lot of really interesting stuff to explore and look at, and a lot of people kind of see it as they drive by, but not so much stop and visit it, and it's really an interesting spot to check out.
Moving on to Region 4. So this is where you find forests, quiet towns, winding rivers, and wide open skies. It's often considered one of the most scenic and peaceful parts of Pennsylvania. What's a hidden gem here that more people should know and have on their radar?
I thought about a few different spots. Cherry Springs State Park, the darkest spot in the eastern U.S. State Game Lands 13 right next to Ricketts Glen that has just as many waterfalls. I mean, there's so much stuff. But despite the fact that it's one of the most scenic parts of the state, one spot I really think stands out there, and one spot that a lot of people, when they ask me what's the most surprising spot I found in Pennsylvania, is Columbus Chapel and Bowl Mansion, just outside of State College. It's the home of a family. They're the namesake for Bowlesburg, the town there. And the one gentleman who owned the mansion back in the early 1900s actually went off and fought in World War I. And while he was over there, he married a French aristocratic woman and came back to Pennsylvania. This woman ended up being the person that inherited the Christopher Columbus family castle in Spain. And they weren't going to move to Spain to go live in this castle. So what they did, and this is something that would never be allowed today with antiquities laws and all this sort of stuff, they took the chapel that was in the castle and brought it to Pennsylvania. So they emptied out all of the things inside the chapel. They built a stone building in their backyard that was the same dimensions and just put it all in there. So they have, in the back of this house, just outside of State College, they have Christopher Columbus's sea chest. They have a Vatican certified piece of the cross. They have Renaissance paintings. They have Columbus family records dating back to the 1600s. It's incredible. It's one of the spots I visited it and I was like, okay, yeah, this isn't true. And then went back and researched it and I was like, oh, wait, it actually is legitimate. And then inside the house, they have Pancho Villa's hat. They have letters signed by astronauts. Because this family was, very well connected. It's not just the Columbus Chapel in the back. The house has amazing stuff too. They have a piano that was in the White House. Truly an incredible spot. And one of those places, like I said, that I was like, this isn't real. This is
Right.
This is made up. And it's legitimate. I was shocked.
And so we're on to Region 5. This includes the Susquehanna, Wayne, Wyoming, Lackawanna, Pike, Luzerne, Monroe, Carbon, Schuylkill counties. This region is known for waterfalls, which we're going to go into later, cool history, mountain towns, and dramatic landscapes. What's one lesser-known destination here that deserves more recognition?
The place that kind of stood out to me is the Tunkhannock Viaduct, which is also known by some as the Nicholson Viaduct. It's in the town of Nicholson. It's this huge railroad bridge that crosses over the valley above the town, and it's still an active bridge. You're in this town, and just this huge viaduct just goes over the houses, the buildings that are there. It's incredibly impressive. When it was built, it was actually the largest concrete structure in the world. It's just really imposing over the town, and it's something that people like drive through if they're on this road and be like, "What is this?" You know, it's really truly like an incredible sight for sure.
And so moving on to our last region, Lehigh, and of course we have one of our most famous areas here, Lehigh, Berks, Lancaster, Bucks, Montgomery, Chester, Delaware, Philadelphia, Northampton. This region includes Philadelphia, like I said, but also charming small towns. What's a hidden gem here that even longtime residents might overlook?
Again, just like all these, there's dozens of things I could pick. I decided to go with the Rosenbach Museum and Library, which is in Philadelphia. It's in just like 2 row houses that have been combined into a museum, just like on a residential street. But it has one of the most amazing book collections you'll find in the world. Just a couple of things I kind of picked out from rereading my article on it, looking at their website. They have the first books that were ever printed in the Western Hemisphere.
Oh my goodness.
They have hundreds of letters from George Washington, Lincoln, old explorers like DeSoto sending letters back and their notes and things like that. And they have Lewis Carroll's copy of Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, that is so
like
cool.
His personal copy. They have, and that's just a few things. It's on this residential street. It's not something you'd expect. You could probably walk by the street a dozen, 100 times and never really be curious like what's in here. But it's really one of the best libraries, certainly in the country, and maybe the world as far as the collection that they have.
And after exploring all 6 of these regions, 67 counties, is there one destination that emotionally stayed with you the most?
It's always hard to see now.
Yeah, right. It's 67 counties.
Yeah, there's interesting things in every county, but there's, great spots everywhere around the state, which is, one of the goals with Uncovering PA is to show people like you should travel the world, go to Europe, go to Asia, go to Africa, go to California, but there's so much to do in Pennsylvania. Just stick around here and, have tons of stuff to see and do. If you don't have the time, the money, the desire to go, beyond that. I really like northeastern Pennsylvania around like Loyalsock State Forest. There's just so many hidden waterfalls, there's covered bridges, there's some great museums up there, just kind of so much to do in that area. That's sort of the one place that I personally, most enjoy going back to, I think.
And what advice would you give someone who wants to start exploring Pennsylvania more intentionally?
I'd certainly be remiss if I didn't say my website. Certainly not everything there is to do in Pennsylvania, like I said, but, with 1,200 plus places and growing every week, there's a ton of stuff to do on there. One of the best resources on my website is I have a travel map. And it's a map that has a pinpoint for every single spot around the state that I've been to. So it's a great resource if you're just like, I've got a couple hours, what's close to me? Or I'm traveling somewhere, where's somewhere I can stop along the way, or people have planned whole week itineraries, based on looking at the map and finding things that interest them. So in my opinion, that's a good place to start. There's other websites out there. There's, local visitor bureaus that have a lot of good information about things to visit, if you're going to Altoona and you don't know what's in Altoona, you can go to the local visitor bureau and find out what kind of things to do around there. Instagram and TikTok and, all these other social channels that have popped up since I started my site that, offer good information as well. So, there's lots of stuff out there. Like I said, whether you're looking to find something to do for an hour on a Saturday or you're looking to plan a whole 2-week trip doing a loop around Pennsylvania.
I'd love to go back to your map. So just so you know, I utilize it when I go to a new area because I grew up in Pittsburgh. I went to school at State College, and now I'm living in the eastern side of the state. And one of the things I love about your map is it's color coded. And so all of the wineries, I believe, are yellow. The waterfalls, I believe, are blue. And I love just clicking through. So it is a really valuable and almost invaluable resource to Pennsylvanians who are looking to explore the state. So
great.
And so one last question before we wrap up. As we approach America's 250th anniversary, of course, being America 250 PA, why is it important to rediscover the landscapes and stories of Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania, it's known as the Keystone State in large part because, it's where the foundations of the United States are. Of course, Philadelphia, Independence Hall there, Liberty Bell, Valley Forge. You have all these spots that are crucial, instrumental to the foundation of Pennsylvania. I never registered in my head until I started going, around Pennsylvania and starting the website. Washington crossing the Delaware. He crossed starting in Pennsylvania. There's a state park there, that preserves that site where that happened. And so it's amazing to go there and see, this is where this happened. This is, the story I've heard. It was real. It happened here.
Right.
Incidentally, James Monroe, the future president, was one of the few American soldiers that were injured in that battle and almost died.
Oh my goodness.
And there's a hospital or a house there that became a hospital where he recovered. There's so much history. And then when you go out in the western half of the state, that's where Pittsburgh, in a large part, built America.
Yeah.
With the steel industry, you go a little, a couple hours north, the oil industry out there, there's so much of America, the skyscrapers in New York City, the coal, in northeastern Pennsylvania burns so clean that's what they used in World War II in the ships so that they were harder to see from, submarines and things like that to track. So, there's so much history there and so much of America is America because of Pennsylvania.
Oh, I love that. That is so true. And Jim, that is all I have for you today, but I'd like to take a moment to thank you so much for joining us and for sharing some of the incredible places that make Pennsylvania such a remarkable state to explore.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Exploration doesn't always require traveling far from home. Some of the most memorable experiences are waiting just down the road, tucked within our forests, our small towns, and the landscapes that shape our Commonwealth. And we are not done exploring just yet. In our next episode, Jim will return as we dive into one of Pennsylvania's most breathtaking natural features, its waterfalls. From towering cascades to hidden falls deep within our state forests, we will uncover some of the most beautiful waterfall destinations across the Commonwealth. So be sure to join us next time as our adventure through Pennsylvania continues. And if you feel inspired to explore, be sure to visit uncoveringpa.com. To our listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode. Keep tuning in to discover your next adventure right here in Pennsylvania. We'll see you next time. Stay PA proud.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cassandra Coleman, Executive Director of America 250 PA. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. We encourage you to learn more about America 250 PA and send us your podcast ideas at america250pa.org.
This has been the America 250 PA Start Here, America Did podcast, produced by Commonwealth Media Services. Stay tuned for more epic Pennsylvania stories at america250pa.org.